right, thank you for being here. We're at the Aspen Collective, 213 South Mill Street in the Wheeler Opera House. And we're very honored to be here with Axel Livingston, one of the great young artists in the Valley. And one of the cool things about my relationship with Axel is I think it goes back maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
And I had a client mention how talented Axel was and went down, saw his stuff, was blown away. He was making paintings at the time.
Yep.
So we collaborated on a show at our old location, and the reception was unanimous that he was a G in being a genius. And so we stayed in touch. He went to school in Detroit. We kept talking, kept working together, and I always believe that great artists always push themselves and evolve. And I always thought, what a tragedy it would be for an artist to like make one piece and then have everyone love that piece, and then the artist gets stuck in a trap where they just keep making the same thing over and over. Well, Axel doesn't suffer from this. And so we did our first show of paintings, and then now we have this exhibition, Soul Bone, which we've been working on for a few years. And we're really honored to have you here.
And honored to be here.
And thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. And so I want to start this talk just by giving us maybe a 60-second, 2-minute real breakdown of what is Soul Bone.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. This concept started about 3 years ago. You know, I've always collected these natural treasures ever since I was young. Asked my parents. When I was really young, in a creek in Old Snowmass, I thought I found a dinosaur gizzard, and we took it to a rock shop, and I think the geologist just said it was one just to kind of, make me feel good. But and it worked. You know, I've always just enjoyed looking for these treasures, and I've collected them. And for some reason, I never used them so much in my art until midway through my my career at this art school in Detroit. I made a piece, and I kind of used this organic object. In this case, it was a cow femur that I found in the Southwest desert. And from this piece, I was able to kind of be guided by this bone, and created this like totem-like form with ceramic and steel. But the fact that bone kind of guided me to this place with this sculpture felt super valuable. And so then I just started really honing in on that, and I would sit with these objects for a while and just kind of think about them, and then I would intuitively just start working and almost thinking about organic growth of these layers forming and solidifying, and almost thinking about how a crystal forms. Crystals, they have these like microscopic, like I think they call them seed patterns, and the molecules and atoms just replicate themselves on this original seed pattern until it grows into its larger form. And so I was really thinking about these organic processes.
And I want to mention, when you look at these sculptures, you see not only bones, but you see the cast iron, and you see barbed wire, and you see this blown glass. And I think one of the cool things about this show is how complex these works are, but this goes back to having access to these materials. Can you tell a little bit about Detroit? Mention the school, your process, and your education in this.
Totally. Yeah. I went into the school as a painter. Most of the sculptures I had done previously were like child's play, paper mache, which I still think that's a valid medium. But I started working in the metal shop at my school just as a job, and I would clean up at the end of the day and whatever. Um, but I just had free time in there. I started messing around with the tools and whatnot, and naturally, I just started gravitating towards working in metal specifically because Detroit, in that environment, there's so much industrial waste, and my collective instincts, were still there. So I would walk around, go around the Detroit River, and find, old pieces of like eroded rebar and different metals, and go in abandoned buildings, and same thing. And um, I just began to transform these materials. And for me, I had a moment where I was thinking about how, everything comes from, the earth, and these resources that are extracted and then processed and turned into these artificial materials, they're still organic at heart. And so I was thinking about how I can reverse process the materials. And so through blacksmithing and using, sometimes when I get these metals, I cover them in borax and I put them in the forge. And this borax is like an acid that eats away at the steel, and it leaves this really like abstract pitting. And and so I was just thinking about like how can I create sculptures that are, totems to the natural world with this sometimes artificial material, and how can I reverse process it. And so I was figuring it out, and then I learned about using these mineral patinas. And so I started using this, it's called titanium dioxide. And when I'm done with a piece, I'll clean it so the metals can accept the mineral, and then I'll get a big torch and heat up the pieces super hot, and then spray on this mineral, and it adheres and kind of turns into like this mineral skin layer on the pieces.
And texture is one thing that I think is a huge thing. Texture in work is incredible. Mm-hmm. And when we were up on the mountain, we worked together on the Midnight Mine, and we'd be digging holes and cleaning stuff out, and we would find this pile of stuff, and I would say, what is this like pile of mud over here? And they go, oh, that's Axel's. He loves this. He loves the texture of this clay. Yeah. Don't touch that. That's Axel's. He's working on it. But I want to go back a little bit to the resources that you had in Detroit, because one of the great stories that I love is that Axel, for how sweet he is, he's still an outlaw. And he was finding old radiators and taking old radiators, throwing them in the forge, getting the actual metal material, and then creating these things. But you had like incredible resources at your disposal.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, which was so cool. And it's rare to have, a glass blowing facility, a foundry where you can cast metal, blacksmithing, ceramics. So I had all this at my disposal. And what DJ was talking about with the radiators was a really cool event where, we would collect these old radiators and we would smash them into smithereens and get all. It would have to be like the size of like a Lay's chip, and then we would, which was just like I felt like I was like working in a gulag, because it'd be like Detroit winter, like behind the metal shop smashing radiators. But it was really rewarding because then and this is actually, a lot of places have foundries where you can cast like bronze and aluminum, but to cast iron it's a lot harder, it's a lot hotter of a temperature. So we have this thing called a cupola, which is like this huge furnace, and we would all smash our radiators and other cast iron that we'd find and still be covered in lead paint and all this nasty stuff. And of course the cupola was outside, but we'd melt it all down and make molds. This is a cast iron sand mold I made. And so that was a really cool moment for me, and thought a lot about alchemy, and the idea of transforming. Alchemy was about transforming base metals into gold, And this is like more of an abstract sense of alchemy to me, but I was still very much like, we have these physical objects, and we're completely melting them down and casting them into these new forms.
And can you talk a little bit about what I love is, I think a lot of your work doesn't deserve to be in a gallery. It should be in a museum.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah. And this totem piece in general, you see all the complexities of the metalworking, but then you added these glass elements. And can you talk a little bit about working with metal versus working with glass, and then a little bit about your evolution to these latest pieces?
Totally. The glass work was really just supernatural for me, and I just started working in the studio, just playing with molten glass. Like I would literally just sit there and with they're basically like big tweezers. They're called jacks. Now I would just like almost pull it like taffy, and then it kind of always just looked like a piece of crap at the end of the day. When it was hot, it would look really cool. Then it would come out of the kiln and it would just look like, just like a blob. But my instinct to collect, I would find these big pieces of broken glass in the studio that were discarded from people, and then I would heat them back up and reassemble them and introduce all these extreme heat and gravity to it, and I would be making all these crazy motions with it, and so when I figured out that process, I kind of just like ran with it. And the cool thing about our glassblowing studio was that it was open 24/7, and you just needed a partner in there. So I lived with two glassblowers for my junior and senior year. So of course we were in there like at all hours of the night, and we're just getting weird, just figuring out these different techniques, and then marrying it to the metal was definitely a really complicated moment for me, and I had to make these really precise holes in the glass and thread I would make these, they're basically like handmade screws, and they thread inside the metal. And then recently, after graduating, I started working with the Baldersons, who are a glassblowing family located right outside of Carbondale. And in their studio, I kind of took a different approach and was making these bead-like totems. And so that was like a fun evolution where I kind of stepped back and refined my practice with actually making vessels. And it's a little bit more traditional glass, but then adorning it with all these, they're soul bones at the end of the day.
And when you see these works, you see the cast iron, the bones, see the glass, and then I want to talk a little bit about these wrappings.
Yep, the wrappings.
One of the things I admire about Axel is he's also a rock star, and that involves skateboarding at 4 a.m. And he hurt his toe, and before the show, he ended up creating a lot of these adornments on a lot of the pieces, kind of adding this natural element. But I think a lot of the idea of these like spiritually infused pieces also goes back to potentially some of the time you spent in Zimbabwe.
Oh yeah, totally.
And we had been talking for a long time, and he said, "Hey, I want to go to Zimbabwe, and I want to do this artist trip, and but I can't really pull it off." And so Axel and I worked in cahoots, and he took a cast of his shoe, and we sold it for $10,000. and then Axel went to Zimbabwe on this artist journey. And I wanted you to mention a little bit about the talisman tree.
Yeah.
And that is my favorite piece. And maybe you can talk a little bit about these adornments that you add to the work.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, and it was a communal effort too, because I started a GoFundMe on top of that, because the trip was expensive. And just huge gratitude to everyone that chipped in to help me go out there. Um, but yeah, when I was in Zimbabwe, I was just like so fascinated with all these mediums that a lot of the artists I was interacting with out there were doing, and they're doing like a lot of basketry, and there's people who are making beads, and so I collected a lot of these beads and other objects, and um, they like to me they are talismans. They're these small objects that just feel like they have like a lot of spiritual significance, and so this piece was kind of a journey into finding a way where I can display all these talismans and think of a resting place for them. And so the basically like the core of this piece is also interesting because it's cast bronze that spills on the ground. So I will collect all these bronze spills and then kind of intuitively weld them back together. And I was intentionally making all these moments where I could hang these talismans from. And so then when the piece was done, then the fun really began, because I was able to sit there and adorn it for, like DJ said, I hurt myself pretty good. So I was sitting on the couch for like a month just adorning this piece and also the sunshine piece. And the wraps are special. It's a technique that I learned from a good friend that was a Mad Hatter ward walker that used to live in Basalt, and he would use that technique, and he learned it. I don't know if he went to Guatemala, but he told me it's like a traditional Guatemalan hair wrapping technique. And so the wraps were really like a great way to assemble these talismans and put them on the talisman tree. And so that piece has, and the talismans they're abstract and they're unique to me. So there's everything from like a piece of metal I found in the Detroit River that's adorned on there, to Zimbabwean beads, to small pieces of glass that I created, and I'm really excited for more talismans to be adorned.
That's what I was going to ask about. Is after seeing your evolution 4 or 5 years ago, we have some great friends here that have your chicken door. Yep. Which was amazing. And at the time, Axel and I have really done 3 shows. Yeah. And the first show sold out, and it was amazing. And I love to give artists a lot of leeway to doing what they want to do. And I like to embrace their ideas and really give them a platform. And when I went to Axel, I said, okay, it's time for your second show. What are your ideas on what you're going to show? And he came to me and he said, I'm thinking about rotted food and Jello. And we did this incredible exhibition that was really what I would call not necessarily sellable, but 100%. Who cares? Sometimes you make work that, and actually it was also about pesticides and mass market food. And we still have a few of the pieces, but they were incredible collages, paintings. And then you came out with this show, and then now what I'm thinking, what's next for you? Where are your desires for where you want to take your artistic practice?
Totally. Well, I've been really looking at a lot of kinetic artists, and I really the soul of the Soul Bone show, I feel like has been super significant for me, and I'm excited to just keep expanding on this concept. But I would really like to make some kinetic sculptures and kites and these pieces to really breathe new life into these artifacts. And I've just had some visions of like these like sculptures that resemble like these similar aesthetics, but as a kite that's flying, 200 feet in the air, and having some sort of festival, especially working on Midnight Mine, and just hearing about DJ's like amazing plans with the artist residency. I can just imagine like a kite festival where people come up and there's just this great performance, and maybe even some of the kites just crash and burn, but I just think it would be like such a beautiful thing to experience that.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because we're redoing the Aspen Design Conference, and that's something that we've been working on, and we hosted last year in the Wheeler, and we're doing it next year. And one of the themes was we went back to the 60s, and they had a kite making
cool.
festival
I
then
didn't
for the
even know
design conference.
Oh,
And there's
wow.
these cool old photos of cars through the West End with people carrying the kites above
Yeah.
them. And so I just want to say that we're really honored to have you be a part of our crew. And I think that watching your evolution has been like one of the greatest experiences to see you develop.
Yeah.
And for us to be a part of that is really special.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
And I just really want to give this guy so much love, because as an artist, it's the best thing in the world to have the support and have the platform, and with DJ it's even deeper than that. It's like it's real family. So it's just, I'm honored to be a part of this and just like truly grateful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's hear it for DJ too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Rock and roll. Thank you.